I've been working in delivery for so many years now, and I've encountered all kinds of strange phenomena. Some things really shouldn't be talked about. But still, I want to know what those phenomena actually were. It happened in a certain building in Toshima Ward, Tokyo. I remember, more than 10 years ago when I was in high school, I worked part my time at a sushi restaurant in that building. Back then, one of the senior staff told me something. He said when you're delivering at night and you take the elevator, you need to be extra careful. He specifically warned me, always stand with your back against the wall. That advice stuck with me, made a real impression. Recently, I got assigned a nighttime delivery to that same building. When I worked there, it was mainly an office building, but there was also a section not many people knew about, a residential area. That day, I got on the elevator from the entrance on the first floor. I was alone. I think it was around the third floor when the elevator stopped and someone got in. A sailorman. He pressed a button for a floor lower than mine, then moved around behind me. I was busy watching the activity information playing on the screen inside the elevator, so I didn't pay much attention to what was happening around me. After a while, the elevator stopped before reaching my floor. The sailorman got out. All perfectly normal, of course. But then, after the doors closed, I heard a faint sound from behind me. I jumped, cowed, and held, letting out a startled cry. Logically, that sailorman had just gotten out. Since he'd gotten out, I should have been alone in the elevator. But when I turned around, I saw him. The sailorman was still in the elevator. He was trembling all over, panicking, gripping me tightly, like he'd been scared out of his mind. I asked him what was it that got off the elevator just now. He couldn't answer my question at all, just kept begging me, over and over, please, can you come with me to where I live? I understood why he was so terrified, because I'd seen it too. What got off that elevator was definitely the shape of a person, and he'd been standing right behind me, so he must have seen it even more clearly than I did. Honestly, I didn't want to go with him to whatever floor that thing was on. I was scared too, but to calm him down, I reassured him, let me finish delivering this package, then I'll go with you. That seemed to settle him a bit. Later that day, as I was moving around inside, I noticed the building's courtyard and room layout looked like a prison. I found out afterward that the place used to actually be a prison. Maybe that's why such unsettling things happen there. I've thought about it since. Things like this, they seem to come for you when your mind is wandering. Like the moment people let their guard down, something slips right in. Last summer, I applied for a part-time job delivering supplies to schools and companies. Every day I'd drive a small truck and deliver maybe 10 items or so. Pretty easy work. One day, I was assigned to deliver some fluorescent lights to an elementary school I'd never been to before. When I arrived, a friendly maintenance worker greeted me with a warm smile. He said the supplies needed to go in the gymnasium storage room, then pointed toward the gym in the distance. I picked up a box of fluorescent lights and followed him across the playground. The sunlight was scorching, but I felt a strange chill. We arrived at the gymnasium. Inside, it was quiet as a graveyard. The air smelled of old wood and dust. I hopped up onto the stage and looked around. Childhood memories came flooding back all at once. Really nostalgic. That kind of stage. It seemed so low now. When I was little, it always felt so high. But just as I was still lost in memories of the past, a sharp gaze suddenly pierced through me. Instinctively, I looked up toward the ceiling truss, and immediately saw a little girl standing there. She looked like a lower-grade student, her pale face staring down at me. I muttered to myself, why is there a little girl up there? Then I stared at her. Her head tilted slightly to one side, and the corners of her mouth seemed to curl upward for a moment. Right then, my co-worker suddenly tapped my shoulder and said in a low voice, "Don't look at her. Look too long and she'll latch onto you. Let's go this way. The moment she finished speaking, a chill crawled up my spine. I quickly lowered my head and hurried after her toward the underground storage room. My co-worker pushed the goods at the front of the shelf deeper inside, turned to me and said, "Put them here." Then, with a hint of nervousness, she added, "Hurry and put everything away. She's coming down. If you hear any sounds, don't acknowledge her, otherwise she'll get closer." Almost immediately, I heard giggling and footsteps rush past me. My hands trembled and I nearly dropped the box. I didn't dare look around. I just frantically shoved all the goods onto the shelves, then stuck close behind my co-worker as we fled the gymnasium. Later, in the staff room, she handed me a cup of coffee. Her face was grim. "You saw her too, didn't you?" "Most people can't see her," I asked, a little frightened. "Is that a ghost?" Her eyes flickered. "Anyway, not long after I started working at the school, I suddenly saw her one day. I was naive. I asked her, 'Little girl, what's wrong?' And from that day on, she latched onto me. She's always hovering around me." She barely finished speaking when she glanced behind me. Her mouth curved into a faint smile as she whispered, "Don't look back. Just go home now." Quickly, my whole body went rigid. I felt a cold breeze at my back, like someone softly blowing air. I grabbed my car keys and practically ran out of the school. At the time, I thought that was the end of it, but I was wrong. One night, I was collecting laundry on my apartment balcony when a small voice came from behind me. I spun around, and there she was, the little girl, standing right behind me. Her entire face was split open like a shattered watermelon. Her eyes had fallen out, and her face was less than 10 centimeters from mine. She opened her mouth and smiled. "You noticed me, didn't you?" I screamed and stumbled backward, covering my face as I cowered in the corner. When I lowered my hands, she was gone. At first I thought it was just a hallucination, but from that day on, she would always appear suddenly when I wasn't prepared, just to scare me. Like when I was washing my face, I'd look up and see her reflected in the mirror. Or when I walked around a corner, the moment I turned, she'd be right there in front of me. And when something fell under the bed and I bent down to pick it up, she'd appear underneath, her face almost touching mine. And she always said, in that sticky voice, "You noticed me, didn't you?" Eventually I couldn't take it in anymore. I went back to the school to find that co-worker and ask her about it, but she'd quit. Another staff member, after learning the truth, told me this actually. There was once a child at this school. He always did dangerous things to get people's attention. In the end, he had an accident. He fell from the top of the gymnasium, died on the spot. His face was completely smashed, and because all he wanted before he died was to attract people's attention, even after death he's still doing the same thing. So everyone at the school knows the rule: if he appears, you'd better pay attention to him, because if you give him your attention, he'll go find someone else. But the more you ignore him, the more he'll latch onto you. And if he latches onto you, you're in trouble, because until he finds the next person he wants to attract, he won't leave. Hearing this, it all suddenly made sense. That day, my co-worker had noticed the little girl was interested in me, so she deliberately tricked me into not looking, so she could free herself from the haunting. She passed that curse-like attachment onto me. Now that little girl appears in front of me almost every day, always in some frightening way, and all I can do is stare at her, because I know if I don't pay proper attention to her, she won't move on to pick her next target. Just now, while I turned to grab something, she suddenly appeared right in front of me again. Giggling, she asked, "You noticed me, didn't you?" Like this, days like this where I could be startled at any moment, I had no idea how much longer they would last. This is the terrifying experience I had while delivering packages. One day, I had to deliver a package to a room in an apartment building. The recipient lived on the top floor. From what I remember, the building looked quite old, probably 12 or 13 stories high. It had that aged, historical feel to it. I took the elevator and slowly made my way to the top floor. When I reached the top floor and walked to the door, I discovered that her door was open about 15 centimeters ajar. I thought to myself, this customer is really careless. Still, I rang the doorbell. No one answered, so I rang it again. It seemed like no one was really home. I peered through the gap in the door. The room inside was dimly lit. I scanned the space briefly, and suddenly I saw something I shouldn't have seen. I nearly cried out. I saw a naked person lying on a chair. It looked like they'd been killed. I was terrified, but I forced myself to stay calm and look more carefully. It turned out to be just a male mannequin wearing a hat. But the disturbing part was 3 knives were stuck in the mannequin's chest. Though the scene made me deeply uneasy, I still had to complete my job, so I pressed the doorbell again. After confirming no one was coming to answer, I had no choice but to leave a delivery notice. But just as I lowered my head to write the notice, I suddenly felt like someone was watching me. I looked up and saw a woman in the doorway. She was peeking at me through the gap. She was a very thin, middle-aged woman. She stared silently at my face, not saying a word. I was genuinely startled by her, but I managed to stay composed and said, "Excuse me, are you so minus so?" I quickly handed her the package, then practically fled to the elevator. My mind was racing with unease. What kind of person was that? Could I be killed by someone that terrifying during my delivery rounds? Looking back, it was unlikely to happen, but at the time it felt absolutely chilling. I didn't understand why would she do something like that to a mannequin. Anyone who would do something like that had to be dangerous. Every day, I drove my delivery truck through narrow residential alleys. That was the daily life of a courier. It seemed monotonous and dull, but within this tedious work, there were occasional experiences that sent chills down your spine. That day, for some reason, there were an unusually large number of packages. I worked until after 8 at night. I handed the goods to my last customer of the day, then stretched my tired body in the elevator. After going downstairs, I drive the truck back to the company and head home. When I reached the first floor, I opened the cargo hold to check. I discovered there was still 1 package left. How careless of me. I looked at the address on the package. This place didn't seem to be in my area. Had I taken the wrong package? I looked at the time and thought about going there and then back to the company. It would be very late. I resisted making this trip, finding all sorts of reasons for myself. But then, I realized even if I didn't deliver it today, I'd still have to deliver it tomorrow. Fine. I'd call the customer first to confirm. Maybe I could deliver it tomorrow instead. I dialed the number on the package. A woman's voice came through on the other end. "Hello. This is such minus and delivery service. I have a package for you, but I'm currently very far from where you live. By the time I get there, it might be quite late. Would it be convenient if I delivered it tomorrow instead?" She said, "Just bring it today. I'll be home all evening. I'll wait for you." After hanging up, I thought, looks like there's no way around it. I'll have to make the trip. I got in the truck, turned on the GPS, and headed toward the destination. Since I was completely unfamiliar with that area, I could only follow the navigation. After driving for 30 minutes, I felt something wasn't quite right. I'd already left the city center. Ahead were only rice fields. It didn't look like a residential area at all, and this road was strangely deserted. Not a single car on it. I watched the street tilted on both sides, casting a dim, reddish glow. An inexplicable sense of dread crept into my heart. I carefully checked the navigation. That's right, just a bit further ahead. I continued driving for a while. After reaching a crossroads, I saw a dilapidated road sign. I turned onto one of the roads. That road was very narrow, with trees on both sides, though they were street-altered. The light was dim. The road surface reflected blurry tree shadows. After driving in for a while, I finally saw what looked like a small settlement. On both sides of the road stood rows of old houses and apartment buildings. I thought to myself, this place is so remote, yet people actually live here. But those houses had no lights at all. They looked especially silent. Maybe it was late and everyone was asleep, so I didn't pay much attention. Then I arrived in front of the customer's apartment. I stopped, got out, and took out the package. I looked at the apartment building before me. Every unit was pitch black. I thought, why does this feel so eerie? I went up to the second-floor walkway of the apartment, then came to the recipient's door. I pressed the doorbell. After a moment, the door opened. A woman came out. She had long hair. She was very beautiful. "Hello, this is your package." I handed her the package, then had her stamp the delivery confirmation. She turned to go back inside. Just as I was about to leave, she suddenly turned back and said, "Wait, when you drive back to the city, no matter who you encounter, don't respond." With that, the door closed. That's when I realized there had been something off just now. What was wrong? Head. When she turned back to speak to me just now, her head had rotated a full 180 degrees. My scalp went numb. Unpleasant sweat ran down my face. I was so scared I tumbled and scrambled down the stairs, jumped into my vehicle, and accelerated away in escape. As I passed through that small road with tree shadows on both sides, I noticed many human figures constantly swaying. I could tell those figures included old people, young people, and children. This place was truly too bizarre. Finally, I saw the traffic light at the intersection. I just wanted to get away quickly, so I floored the gas pedal. When I reached the intersection, I didn't care about the red light. I turned right directly. The moment I turned, a terrifying horn blared behind me. I was already panicking then. I didn't dare look in the rearview mirror. I just stomped on the gas and accelerated away. Then a series of urgent siren sounds caught up with me, and I heard a loudspeaker saying I should pull over. It was the police. I immediately stopped at the roadside and rolled down my window. Two police officers came up to my vehicle. One of them, a young officer, asked me in a very harsh tone, "What are you doing? Why were you running?" I was still nervous then. I really couldn't answer. The more experienced officer beside him sent the young officer away, then asked me, "What happened? Your face is pale. Are you okay? Can I see your license?" I took out my driver's license and handed it to the officer. After looking at the license, he asked me, "Are you still making deliveries right now?" I answered him, "Yes. I just finished delivering the last package." He continued questioning, "Where did you go to deliver it?" I pointed behind me and said, "There's a small road back there. I delivered it inside there." The experienced officer frowned and confirmed with me, "You mean inside that small road back there?" "Yes. There's a small settlement inside. Some houses and old apartments." "You must be mistaken. There are no houses inside." When I heard this, I felt puzzled. That experienced officer, seeing my disbelieving expression, told me to get out of the car. Then he led me along the road, walking back. After walking a short distance, he shone his flashlight on a sign in the dark area by the roadside. Then he said, "Look at that." I looked carefully. The sign read such minus and minus such cemetery, and an arrow pointed toward that small road. After that, they took me back to the police station. Later, that young officer asked me some questions. He suspected I might be delivering contraband, and meeting with criminals there. But I honestly told him it was just a simple delivery. Then I told him every detail of the bizarre experience I had there, one by one. However, his face showed he didn't believe what I was saying. In the end, because he had no evidence to prove I was delivering contraband, he only had me leave my information, then let me go. Later, as I was about to leave the police station, that experienced officer walked over. He patted my shoulder, then said to me, "You're not the first person to encounter this kind of strange thing. Next time, don't go making deliveries so late." Now I'm working part-minus time at a sushi restaurant doing deliveries. This might be my personal bias, but I think in the delivery business, sushi delivery is probably the hardest. Because sushi emphasizes freshness, delivery time must be precise to the second. Plus, sushi falls apart easily. Yet we have to ride those difficult -to- control small 3-wheeled motorcycles, you know. The kind, the ones with a box on the back and a little roof over it to make deliveries. And the sushi came in wooden tubs, so we had to go back the next day to collect them. Real pain. But what was even worse was that our delivery range stretched 20 minutes one way at the farthest point. We didn't just deliver to the city center, sometimes we had to go all the way out to remote rural areas, which meant we couldn't avoid passing through some pretty strange and creepy places. So naturally, our shop had its share of terrifying delivery stories making the rounds. One of them went like this. That day at work, my senior suddenly came running back into the shop. He told everyone there was one house where he couldn't collect the tub. Normally customers would leave the tub outside their door for pickup, that was the understood rule. But some people just don't follow the rules. And when you run into those types, you have no choice but to ring the bell and ask them to bring it out. But this house wasn't that kind of situation. The tub was sitting right there outside. The problem was, there was a locked iron gate at the entrance. To get the tub, you'd have to open that gate. He tried pressing the doorbell, but no one answered, and the iron gate wouldn't budge. Breaking in was obviously out of the question. He was standing there trying to figure out what to do when suddenly the neighbor lady from next door came out and noticed him. She asked, "Is something wrong?" I'm here to collect the tub, but I can't get the gate open. Is this the right house?" "Yes, that's right," the neighbor lady answered with a puzzled look on her face. "That's strange though. No one lives there." He freaked out when he heard that, rushed back to the shop right away and reported what happened. And because of this incident, everyone got all excited, talking over each other, laughing. That house must be haunted. A ghost actually ordered sushi delivery. Our business has crossed over to the other side. I couldn't really laugh along with them, because the person who delivered sushi to that house that day was me. My senior teased me, saying, "You're the first guy to serve a ghost." Everyone cracked up, only me sitting there with my head down, feeling complicated about the whole thing. Right then, the phone rang. My senior picked it up and listened. Turns out, it was that very ghost house everyone had just been talking about. The voice on the other end said, "You still haven't come to collect the tub." My senior's voice was shaking as he responded and hung up. Then he pushed the collection job onto me, saying with a mocking tone, "Go on." Then, I had no choice. Had to steel myself and go back again. When I returned to the shop, everyone made jokes about it again. How was the ghost house? You didn't die there, lucky you. After hearing all that, I told them the truth I'd learned when I went to collect the tub just now. The person handed me the tub themselves. Someone was home. A real person. My senior joked back. "Really? So that's the second time you've encountered a ghost? Maybe you're being haunted now." I didn't wait for him to finish laughing. It wasn't a ghost. It was a living person. Someone really is there. Everyone looked at each other with confused expressions, then asked me what I meant. I said, "When I went to that house, The person who lives there came out themselves and handed me the tub. I even chatted with them for a bit, told them about what happened to my senior, and they said, "That's really strange, because if it was the lady next door, she died last week." The moment I finished speaking, my senior's face fell, turned pale white. He couldn't laugh anymore either. This isn't some ghost story, but for me it left a deep shadow. I remember it was a day in winter. I'd heard that the nearby social welfare center was recruiting volunteers May to help people in need, the poor or the elderly. I thought maybe I could be useful, so I signed up. Before long, a social worker from the welfare center contacted me. "In a few days we're going to make cookies to give to people who need them. If you're free, could you come help?" I thought it was a good opportunity, so I agreed. That morning I threw myself into making cookies, took photos with everyone from the community. The atmosphere was really pleasant. Then in the afternoon, the staff from the welfare center came over and asked me, "Do you have time to stay a bit longer? Could you help us with something?" I answered, "Sure." Then they asked if I was a local resident. I said yes. "Then you should know these addresses, right?" I said I did. After that, they gave me a list of addresses and the cookies we'd made that morning, 1 box per household. I was supposed to help deliver them to families in need. A staff member from the ministry office drove, while I was responsible for getting the cookies into each family's hands. So we set off to make our deliveries. But when we arrived at one particular house, I saw that the place was falling apart, completely swallowed up by trees. The iron gate at the entrance had rusted through. The yard was overgrown with weeds and piled high with trash and junk. Basically, picture something like a ruin. I asked the office worker, "Are you sure? Is this really the place?" He checked the address and said, "Yeah, the address is right." No choice. I got out of the car, steeled myself, grabbed the cookies, and headed toward the house. I pushed open the iron gate, shoved aside some of the undergrowth, cleared away some of the garbage, and finally I could see the door, standing there looking at it. I couldn't help thinking, does anyone actually live here? I walked up to the door and pressed the doorbell. It seemed to be broken. No sound. So I knocked a few times. No response from inside. I was just about to give up and head back to the car to move on to the next delivery when suddenly a strange sound came from inside the house. It was like the kind of weak, breathless moan a patient might make from a hospital bed. The moment I heard it, my spine went cold. It was as if I'd been wrapped in a chill. But then the voice said, "The door's not locked. Come in." I forced myself to go inside. Once I was in, the place was a disaster, trash everywhere. I made my way down the hallway, dodging garbage as I went deeper into the house. When I reached the first room, I saw an old man lying on a bed so thin he looked like a skeleton. But what shocked me even more was that in the corner of the room, there was a pile of feces, a pile like a small mountain, black and foul. The smell was so sharp I nearly threw up. I'd never seen anything like it in my life. I was terrified. All I wanted was to put down the cookies and get out of there as fast as possible. But then the old man suddenly spoke to me. "Young man, could you get me a bottle of water from the fridge?" I forced myself to walk into his room, holding back my nausea, and opened the refrigerator. The moment I opened it, a sour smell hit me in the face, and inside there was a pot of soup. But what scared me most was this: I saw a rat in the soup. I jumped back a step. Then I realized the rat didn't seem to be moving, it was dead. Only then did I dare to get closer and look carefully, and I discovered that the old man had apparently been using rats as food, because floating in that pot were several rats that had been cooked through. At that moment, I really was about to vomit. I quickly grabbed a bottle of water from beside it, handed it to him, set the cookies down next to him, and prepared to get the hell out of that house. But after the old man took the water, he reached out his hand to me and said, "Thank you so much. Come on, let's shake hands." Honestly, I consider myself someone with pretty strong mental fortitude, but right then, I really couldn't bring myself to shake his hand. What I was thinking was shake hands. The smell in this room is about to make me lose it. So I just smiled and nodded at him. Then I left. After I jumped back in the car, I asked the office worker, "What the hell is going on in that house? Who is that old man? Why is he living in conditions like that?" And you know what he told me? "Every time we come here, no one opens the door, so we always skip it. You're the first person who actually delivered inside." When I heard that, all I could think was a string of curses. Even now, I can still clearly remember that corner of the room piled with feces, that pot of rat soup, that old man with no teeth left, dried up like a corpse. Yes, that old man living in those conditions. It really was pitiful. But every time I think back on it, I still feel sick. That incident left a huge shadow on my mind. When I was still in school, I worked part-meanest time at a place that did sushi delivery. Back then, near where I lived, there was an apartment building that was very famous in the prefecture. It was a pretty large complex. The reason it was famous was that locals called it the Ghost Apartments. The building's location was close to the city center. The units were luxurious, but there were an unusual number of vacancies. For a while, there was even a period when on certain floors, every other unit had a for sale sign up. That alone was already highly unusual. One day, someone at our branch location got into a car accident, so I went over there to cover their delivery route. An order came in from that building. Since the apartment complex was so distinctive and I knew the area well, I took the delivery myself. I drove over. When I arrived, I noticed something odd. Despite being such an upscale building, the light bulbs in the elevator lobby were broken, flickering constantly. It felt a little strange, but I pressed the button for the 9th floor anyway and delivered the sushi to the designated unit. But when I got to the door, no matter how many times I rang the bell, no one came out. It was around 9 at night. I figured maybe the resident had stepped out unexpectedly, so I went back to my car, planning to contact the shop. The staff told me to try one more time, and if there was still no answer, just bring it back. So I got on the elevator again. Just as I was about to press the close button, a drunk man in a suit came jogging into the elevator. I nodded at him and asked which floor he needed. He told me the 9th floor. "Oh, same as me," he asked me quietly. "Which unit are you going to?" After I answered, he recoiled backward, startled. Then his smile vanished. His expression turned serious as he said, "Last week, the person living there committed suicide. It's vacant now." When I heard that, unpleasant sweat broke out on my face. I thought he was drunk and joking. So I asked, "You're kidding, right?" The words had barely left my mouth when the elevator reached the 9th floor. After we got out, his unit was right next to the elevator. The problem unit was the 3rd door down from his. I steeled myself and walked toward that room while he stood at his doorway, watching me uneasily. When I reached the door, no matter how many times I pressed the bell, there was no sound inside, no sense of human presence. So I had no choice but to give up. I hurried back to the elevator. The man asked me, "Are you absolutely sure that's the right unit? Could it be someone with the same surname upstairs or downstairs?" But I told him I'd already double-checked. That was the only unit in the entire building with that surname. He gave a bitter laugh and said, "That's really creepy. How could this happen?" Then he disappeared back into his own apartment. After that, I followed instructions and brought the food back. But as soon as I returned to the shop, the manager tore into me. He said the person who ordered the sushi had called to complain why hadn't it arrived yet. The manager was convinced I'd gotten the unit number wrong. I hurriedly explained about the strange situation with that room, but the manager just kept shaking his head, saying it was impossible. Finally, half minus believing me, he came back to the apartment building with me. We went to that unit together and rang the bell repeatedly. Still no answer. The nameplate was still there, but inside there was absolutely no sound. By then it was close to 10 at night. I remembered that man, so I suggested we go ask him. When we walked to the unit near the elevator, the manager asked me, "You're sure this is the one?" I said yes. Then the manager pointed at the sealed mailbox slot on the door and said, "This unit's vacant too." I quit that job that very day, and I've never dared go near that place again. One day, a senior colleague at the company collapsed from heat stroke, so he temporarily took over his senior's route. There was a package that needed to be delivered to a resident in a certain housing complex. In that cruel heat, that unbearable season, he waited, thinking to himself, no wonder his senior got heat stroke. Maybe I should bring him some adult magazine when I visit him at the hospital. The weather was so hot, and no one was coming to the door. The longer he waited, the more irritated he felt. But just as he was about to pull out the absence notice to fill it out, there was a click. The door suddenly opened. Standing there was a woman who looked plain, with a somewhat gloomy air about her. But looking closer, that jet meanest black hair, that pale skin, those refined features, she was a strikingly beautiful woman. A rare sight. He said to her briefly, "Hello, I'm here with a delivery." The woman didn't say a word. She just quickly produced her seal, accepted the package, and immediately shut the door. A week later, he went to that housing complex again to make a delivery. This time, as soon as he rang the bell, someone opened the door right away. "Hello, please sign or stamp here." The beautiful woman said nothing. She just turned and walked into the living room, leaving him standing in the entryway. Since she'd stepped into the entryway this time, she felt a little thrill of satisfaction. She glanced around. The entryway was spotless. Not a speck of dust anywhere. There wasn't even a single hair on the floor. She thought to herself, must be someone who really loves cleanliness. Just then, the woman came back from the living room. As the woman opened the door leading to the living room, she clearly heard a low, guttural sound. But the woman acted as if she'd heard nothing at all. She stamped the delivery slip, picked up the package, and quietly walked back into the house. She called out toward the interior, "Please take care of me in the future," and then left. The next day, before the morning meeting, she chatted with her senior colleague who'd returned to work about that beautiful woman. That woman was seriously gorgeous. Her senior rolled her eyes. "I think you've been watching too many scam documentaries lately." At that moment, her supervisor interrupted the conversation, his expression grave. "Recently we've been receiving continuous complaints from customers saying their packages weren't delivered. I'm not pointing fingers at anyone specifically, but our company's already had enough negative press lately. Everyone, please be more careful." Everyone straightened up after hearing that. She perked up too, then prepared to go make her deliveries. However, as she flipped through the delivery list, planning today's route, she saw that apartment complex's address again. A little thrill ran through her, but at the same time, she remembered that eerie sound she'd heard last time. She wondered what exactly was in that room. With that question in mind, she headed to the apartment complex. The woman opened the door and once again led her into the entryway. While the woman went inside to get her stamp, she waited, thinking to herself how envious she was of the woman's husband. Just then, she noticed the door to the living room was half-minus open. She couldn't stop her curiosity. Furtively, she peeked through the gap, and she saw something bizarre. She saw what looked like a child's hand, but the skin was wrinkled and shriveled, slowly emerging from a pile of blankets, along with the sound of fabric rubbing against fabric. The thing made a rustling, scratching noise. It seemed to be crawling toward the entryway. Just as the thing was gradually revealing itself from beneath the blankets, she suddenly locked eyes with it. Her whole body broke out in goosebumps. Terrified, she bolted out the door and fled. After escaping to the first floor, she looked up at the apartment above, thinking that thing didn't chase after me. What a relief. Not long after, she received a phone call summoning her back to the office. When she returned, her supervisor loudly interrogated her. At the last morning meeting, didn't we talk about customers saying their packages weren't delivered? That was you, wasn't it? Tell me, where have you been hiding customers' packages? She was somewhat angry but answered helplessly, I haven't hidden anything. Her supervisor pressed on. Someone said they saw you running around that apartment complex. A lot of those units have been empty for ages, and the doors are often unlocked. Did you hide the packages in there? In that moment, the image of that beautiful woman flashed through her mind, along with that strange creature. Something about this whole situation seemed off. So the next day, she asked her senior colleague to accompany her to the apartment complex. As they walked, she thought to herself, if that beautiful woman is really there, that would be lucky. But if there's no one there, that would be terrifying. When they reached the door, she and her senior rang the doorbell several times. No one answered. She thought, maybe she's not home today.